सदा
सदाशिवसमारम्भां
शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we continue where we left off, and we are now going to chant the 59th verse of the second chapter. So please unmute yourself and we can chant it. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Shri Bhagavan
Vishaya Vinivartante Niraharasya Dehinaha Rasavarjam Rasopyasya Param Drishtva Nivartate. Okay, so first let's look at the words. Vishaya, Vishayaha, Vinivartante, Niraharasya Dehinaha, Rasavarjam, Rasaha Api, Asya. So that word breaks into three pieces. Rasavarjam, Rasaha Api Asya, Param Drishtva Nivartate. And the Anvaya is Niraharasya Dehinaha Vishayaha Rasavarjam Vinivartante. Full stop. Niraharasya Dehinaha Vishayaha Rasavarjam Vinivartante. Full stop. Param Drishtva Asya Rasaha Api Nivartate. So Nira Aharasya. Aharam is food, feeding. So Nira Aharasya, the one who does not feed. Feed what? Feed the Indriyas. So the one who does not indulge in the sense organs. Dehinha, for that person, for that jiva. Vishayaha Vinivartante. Right? The objects turn back. The objects of the senses, they are no longer a priority for him. So Vishayaha Vinivartante. Objects are no longer a priority. He is able to ensure that he does not indulge in the sense objects, but Rasavarjam is there. Rasavarjam remains, means the longing for the objects, that taste for the objects, that remains. That is the first part. And then he says Param Drishtva. Having known the Param Brahman, Asya Rasaha Api Nivartate. Even that longing goes away. So there are two parts. One is saying that for the person who does not indulge in the sense organs, the senses become controlled, right? But the remnant remains, the taste for the sense organ remains. But having understood Brahman, even that longing goes away. So Krishna is talking about two types of longing or addictions. Basically, we are all talking about the mind. So there are two types of addictions here. One is the addiction to the sensory experience, and one is the mental addiction. So there is an actual physical addiction where you really cannot give up the experience. That is the sensory addiction. And then one is, even when you give up the sensory addiction, the taste may remain. The mental addiction may linger for some more time. And that is why, in habits which are very deep rooted, like cigarettes or liquor, people give up for some time. And during the time that you give up, you have to ensure that you don't lapse back. So maintaining that, giving up the addiction is an extremely difficult job. And therefore, for example, alcoholics, during the rehabilitation period, you have to be extremely careful. Because if he tastes again, even after 6-7 months of staying away from liquor, supposing he tastes once or twice, then that addiction will reoccur. So that's what he's saying. So he says, Krishna is saying that one has to be extremely careful about the addiction to sense organs, because the mind has got a weakness that once the addiction is removed, even then, sometimes the taste, the memory of the addiction and the pleasures that it gave us, that remains. And therefore, as long as that memory remains, as long as that idea remains that yes, this particular addiction can give me pleasure, there is a danger that one can relapse into that same habit. And therefore he says, Vishayaha vinivartante. The sense objects will remain, will have gone away from the person who has renounced them. So physically he has renounced them. He can stay away from them when they are not in front of him. So Dhamma he has achieved, but the mental taste for them has not gone away. Sometimes, we are not even aware that we have this taste with us. So until the object is not there in front of us, we don't bother. We say that, I am got over the addiction. But rasa varjamaha, that varjam means accept and rasa means the taste. So accept the taste. Everything is gone. But the mental fancy, the mental, longing for the object remains. And that's why he's saying this is a big mistake. And that's a thing about sannyasis. People who go to, say, Rishikesh and Uttarkashi and all that, and become sannyasis, you will find that when a grihastha, when a householder visits them, then sometimes the sannyasis feel that, oh, we made a mistake, because their rasa has not gone. Their longing for the grihastha life has not gone. So while they are sitting, at a place and basically cutting themselves off physically, but mentally they are dwelling upon those pleasures. So such people are not going to be very successful, and they can be actually called hypocrites. And Krishna has referred to this earlier also. Therefore, it is better that unless I am, totally grown out, totally able to renounce mentally also, I remain in the world and become a mature person. And once I become a mature person, then I can drop the addiction completely. So growing out of an addiction, growing out of a habit is the correct way, not suppression. Suppression is dangerous because suppression can burst forth again at any time. And therefore, until a person grows out, this rasa continues, this fancy, this desire, the craving continues for the sense objects, even after the sense objects are gone. And Krishna says, can this craving go away? He says, yes. Asya rasaha api nivartanti. Even this craving for the sense pleasures will go away when it's replaced. When the mind's craving, the mind's thoughts about that particular object, when they are replaced by spiritual ananda. And the Shastram gives such an ananda, which is something which most people don't realize. That study of Vedanta, that the assimilation of Vedanta gives you a very deep contentment. And most people who think that sannyasis are to be sympathized with because they have the regular pleasures of the world are not available for them. But they don't know that the ananda that he gets out of the Shastra study, the Vidya Ananda, that is much, much more powerful than the miserable pleasures of the flesh which he can find. And once that spiritual ananda is discovered, that rasavarjam, the yearning, the craving for physical pleasures, that will disappear. Until that spiritual ananda is discovered, it will continue. And therefore, it is param dishtva, paradarshanam. So paradarshanam is understanding Brahman. So when the spiritual knowledge is well assimilated, he gets joy and he gets extreme ananda. This is the ananda of the assimilation of Brahman itself. And before that major Ananda, before that very strong Ananda, all the other worldly pleasures, they become insignificant. And in one of the previous slokas, Krishna has said that when a person has a lake full of water, why should he bother to go for a pond of a corporation water, which may or may not come? And therefore, Param Drishtva, after discovering that Ananda in himself, Nivartante, no more craving is there. And Shankara comments very beautifully on this rasa nivrittihi, this going away of the craving. He says, Vishaya Vijnanam Nirbijam Sampadyate. So, Vishaya Vijnanam, the perception of the sense objects, they will continue because you have sense organs and there are sense objects. So, it is not that the sense objects will go away, but when they come in front of you, Vishaya Vijnanam, the perception will continue. But he says that perception, that Vijnanam, it becomes Nirbijam Sampadyate. So, Bijam is a seed. Nirbijam is something which is not a seed. And therefore, that perception is no longer having any fangs because it is Nirbijam. It is not capable of giving rise to any Ragadvesha. That's why Nirbijam. That seed is like a roasted seed. It can no longer generate anything. And therefore, once Ananda has come, once Vishayananda has been replaced by Brahmananda, then you will find that even when the most attractive of all sense objects come in front of you, perception will remain, but that perception is not followed by generation of desire. This is the difference between the Jnani and the Ajnani. For the Jnani, the perception is just that, perception. It does not have any follow-up action. For an Ajnani, perception is always followed up by desire. That perception is the bijam, is the seed for the generation of Ragadvesha. So, and the perception of this as the Jnani does, without generating anything, the perception of something which is not followed by the birth of likes and dislikes, that is called the objective creation, the Ishvara Srishti. So this Ishvara Srishti is God's creation. And only when you have the understanding of Brahman as yourself, then only will you realize that I am perceiving what is there as it is. And because it doesn't generate in likes and dislikes, what I see is the original creation, the objective creation. Normally, we all see creation through the curtain of our own likes and dislikes, which is subjective creation, Jiva Srishti. So two very important words. Ishvara Srishti is what is seen. The world is seen as Ishvara Srishti by the Jnani. The world is seen as Jiva Srishti by the Ajnani. So, does this mean that Jnani should not be happy? No. Jnani is always happy. If he is called for a wedding, if he is called for a birth of a child, it's a happy occasion for sharing, right? And he is always happy. So, spiritual Ananda means that you should, it does not mean that you should not enjoy the worldly pleasures, but only means that you should not lean upon them. If the worldly pleasures are there, it is great. It is bonus Ananda. If it comes, it's fine. I am happy. If it does not come, also I am happy. And therefore, the Jnani also enjoys the world. But that worldly enjoyment, he is not dependent upon that. It is a bonus for him. It's in addition to this Brahmananda, his internal contentment, he also enjoys worldly Ananda. So he enjoys more Ananda than the rest of them. And therefore, Param Drishtva. Param Drishtva is internalizing the teaching. You have to internalize, assimilate the teaching. What is that teaching? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is the reality. The Jagat, the world is Mithya. So making my knowledge firm, assimilating the idea that I am Brahman, that is what is called Param Darshanam over here. The vision of the infinite. Okay. So please unmute yourself and we can chant the next verse. Yatato hyapi kaunteya
यततो ह्यपि कौन्तेय
पुरुषस्य विपश्चितः
पुरुषस्य विपश्चितः
इन्द्रियाणि प्रमाथीनि
प्रमाथीनि
हरन्ति प्रसभं मनः.
हरन्ति प्रसभं
Okay, so let us look at the words. Hey Kaunteya, yatatahi vipaschitaha. So, hey Kaunteya. Okay, fine. Let me first give you the word meanings because it might be slightly difficult otherwise. So, yatatahi api. Api becomes hi api. Yatatahi api Kaunteya. Purushasya vipaschitaha. Indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manaha. So, hey Kaunteya, vipaschitahi purushasya yatata api, kama. So, Kaunteya, kama, vipaschitahi purushasya yatata api, kama, pramathini indriyani mana prasabham haranti. So, there is a he over here, vipaschitahi. He is equal to yasmat, because. And therefore, hey Kaunteya, son of Kunti, because vipaschita purushasya, a discriminative person, what is he doing? Yatataha. He is sadhaka. He is putting forward effort. He is putting forth effort. But even though he is doing that, even though this person is putting forward effort, and even though he is a very discriminating person, he is a very serious sadhaka, what happens? Api. Api means even though he is doing all this, manaha, the mind, prasabham haranti, is forcefully taken away, pramathini indriyani, by the 5 powerful sense organs. So the powerful sense organs of a person, even who is making an effort and who is a person who is able to be discriminate, his mind is also forcefully taken away, hey Arjuna. So Krishna is saying that, hey Arjuna, the powerful sense organs forcibly carry away the mind of even the wise sadhaka who is putting forward appropriate efforts. What is he saying? Sense regulation, damaha, is not easy. And there are 2 lessons here. The first lesson is that if in my efforts I fail, I need not feel guilty. Why? That is why Krishna says, even for the person who is a person of wisdom, is a person who is able to discriminate between what is good and what is not good, and he's putting forward efforts also, even then the mind can be taken away by the powerful sense organs. And because those sense organs are so powerful that initially people will have a very high chance of failure, and therefore one need not feel bad. So this is the first lesson. If you fail initially, there is no need to feel guilty. And the second lesson is there, they are powerful, pramathini. They are powerful, and therefore you should be very alert. Therefore, on one hand, I should very clearly realize that it's a very difficult task and there is a possibility that I will fail. And if I fail, I should not feel guilty. And on the other hand, I should realize that even while not feeling guilty, I should still be alert. So therefore, alertness with regard to all the operations of the 5 senses. How I talk, what I hear, what I taste, what I see, all this, I should be very, very alert when I'm talking about this. Right? Now look at the words yatataha. So yatataha means prayatnam kurvanti, the person who is making an effort. And what is this effort? This effort is to understand the anatma and the atma difference. And therefore he is always involved in seeing that all karma has limitations. Right? It's called Vishaya Dosha Darshanam. The limitations of all the karma. All karma is said to have three limitations, tridoshaha. So karmani tridoshaha. All karma has said to have three limitations. What are they? The first is dukkha mishri tattvam, which means that any fruit of karma has three parts. So dukkha mishri, it is always a mixture of dukkham, which is also a mixture of sorrow, of pain. Why? Because there are three things. There is pain involved in acquiring an object, right? So supposing that I am doing some karma for the acquisition of some object, material object, which I think will give me pleasure. So that pleasure arising out of the acquisition of that object is tainted with three types of sorrow or pain. The first pain is the effort I make in acquiring that object. That effort itself, any effort is a pain. Therefore, that effort itself is pain. The first pain is the effort that I make in acquiring the object. Once having acquired the object, then I have to maintain it. I have to hold on to it. So there is effort involved in that also. That is also pain. And finally, when the object is lost, because all objects, all anatma is temporary only. No object can remain with me permanently. So whatever object I acquire and maintain, in due course, that object will also go away. So there is a pain of loss also. So three different types of efforts are involved. Each effort is equated to a pain. So the effort of acquiring, the effort of preserving the object, and afterwards the loss, the pain caused by the loss of the objects. So these three are called the different types of pain with which the pleasure of acquiring an object is mixed. And therefore it says dukkha mishri tattva. Mishri means mixture. So that sorrow which is mixed with the pleasure of the karma phalam. Every karma phalam has this particular three types of pain in it: acquisition, maintenance, loss. So that's the first defect, dukkha mishri tattva. Every karma phalam is dukkha mishri tattva. Then the second one is called atripti karatvam, which is there is a lack of satisfaction in any acquisition. You acquire an ambassador car, after some time you will want a Honda City. You acquire a Honda City, after some time you will want a Mercedes Benz. So no object can really satisfy me permanently, because somebody else will always have a better object, and therefore I will want that. So atripti karatvam, every karma phalam will leave scope for further acquisition. There is no total satisfaction at all. So atripti. And the third one is bandhakatvam. Every karma phalam binds you by attachment to the karma phalam. So these three are the defects of any karma phalam. This he knows. So that is why yatataha, this person who is making the proper effort, he is trying to look at these three defects of any karma phalam all the time. The defects are basically that dukkha mishri tattvam, consisting of the three sorrows, atripti karatvam, the principle that you will never be satisfied with any karma phalam, and bandhakatvam, knowing that there will be bondage because of your attachment to the karma phalam. Right? So these are three defects of karma, which is called Vishaya Dosha Darshanam, the defects of any object. This he keeps in mind. And then Krishna says Vipaschitaha. Vipaschita, the person who is a learned person, Medavinaha, learned person. He has studied the scriptures. He has understood sadhana chatushta sampatti. He has understood what is chitta shuddhi. And he said Vipaschita eva, Vipaschita api. Even though this person is learned in the scriptures, he understood the scriptures properly, but in a moment of weakness, he can be distracted, and therefore api. In spite of his sense of all this, in spite of all the learning, pramathi. Pramathi is the disturbance caused in the mind by the sense organs. So pramatha is basically mathi is the churning rod. The rod with which churn. In the old days, they used to make butter out of doing that, churning the butter. extracting the butter from there, you use a churning rod. So churning rod, what do? They cause disturbance in the liquid in which they are churning. And similarly, the sense organs are likened to the churning rod. When your eyes are seeing any disturbing sight, your eyes are the churning rod and the disturbance is being caused in your mind. So while in meditation, if you are smelling some nice masala dosa in the kitchen, then your nose is the churning rod. So any of the sense organs can function as a churning rod, churning in the sense disturbing the mind. Therefore, he says, Indriyani Pramathini. The sense organs are very, very powerful. So, Mathi is the churning rod. Pramathi is Prakashena Mathi, specially powerful churning rod. So, the sense organs are not just like normal churning rods, they are specially powerful churning rods. And just like you use the churning rod in the curds to draw out the butter, the sense organ is a very powerful churning rod. And for the curd to turn into butter, you need only one churning rod. But here you have 5 of them. 5 churning rods being the 5 sense organs. And they can churn continuously all the time because they are operative all the time. And what do they churn? They churn the mind into a violent state of disturbance. Right? So you can remember that somebody abuses you, you get disturbed. So your ears have become the churning rod. And the eyes, when you see a sight which is disturbing, eyes get disturbed. Similarly, nose, tongue, skin, they are not all that powerful, but they are also capable of disturbing you. Therefore, eyes and ears are most powerful, but the other 3 are also capable of disturbing us. And therefore, he says, Manaha Haranti. They can take away the mind. Haranti means to take away. Manaha is the mind. They can take away mind from your spiritual practice. From the Vedanta, they can take away your mind. And how do they do it? Prasabham, forcefully. Prasabham is the adjective, the Visheshanam qualifying which verb? Haranti. Haranti means to take away. They forcefully take away your mind from your practice, from your spiritual sadhana. They forcefully take away your mind towards the objects, towards the Vishayas, towards the sense objects. And remember that once your mind is disturbed, all the teaching which you have learned in class, it is no longer available to you at that point of time. So even though your intellect is trying to retain the teaching, and the intellect keeps reminding you of the value of samatvam, of balance of mind, but manaha haranti. All the Gita teaching that you have there, it's all gone. So you forget because of the disturbance, because of whatever problem has caused the disturbance, you forget all the teachings, you forget that you should be in a balance of mind, you temporarily become a wild animal, and you scream at everybody around you, and then your partner will ask you, what is the use of going to Gita class if you can, so get so violent. So that it makes you even more angry, right? So they will laugh at your teaching, they will laugh at your classes, and that will make you more angry. Therefore, if you are not alert, the mind can become very turbulent. And once the mind becomes turbulent, Vedanta goes out of the window and you descend to the basic level of violence, which is the level of an animal. So what is to be done? So Krishna says in the next verse. So we will chant the 61st verse.
Daviji, can I ask one question now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
The third thing you said that at every karma phalam gives at binding, that third thing, that
attachment to karma phalam.
Yeah. Yes. So, but suppose this spiritual practice actually it is leading to finally liberation, right? So is it not? So is it also this karma phalam coming out of this kind of practice should be called as attachment? Leading to attachment.
Does it bind you? Is the question. You have to. How does it bind you? How does Chitta Shuddhi bind you? It doesn't bind you, right?
So that means all. Yeah. So all karma phalam, should I call that all karma phalam has these 3 doshas? Or
all karma phalam has 3 doshas, excepting that which is your primary sadhana, which is Chitta Shuddhi over here. Okay.
Okay, sir.
And
That is,
Chitta
thank you.
Shuddhi can bind you if you are going to be so attached that you will do only karma and not come to jnana.
Yes,
Then it has
yes.
become binding anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You must
Yes.
know when to hold the tiger's tail and how to let it go. You know what happens when you hold a tiger's tail, right? I don't think you held one, but supposing you're holding a tiger's tail, unless you know the correct technique of letting go of the tiger's tail, what will happen?
It will go down and cut.
No, there will be swaha. You'll be the dinner of the tiger. Okay. So holding on to tiger's tail is fine. Similarly, holding on to karma is also fine, but you must know how to let go. So that is what is being discussed. You should ensure that you don't fall victim to the karma. That is why he says,
Thank
look
you.
at the three doshas always. Okay, so we chant verse number 61. So please unmute yourself. Tani sarvani sanyamya
Ani
Ani sarvani
sarvani
yukta asita matparaha
Asit
vashehi yasyendriyani
Vashehendriyani
tasya prajna pratisthita.
Tasya Prajna Pratishta.
Okay, so look at the grammar first. Tani sarvani sanyamya. So a small note here. Some people say samyamya. So it's only a sanyamya is because there is a chanting rule which says that the anugraha, the dot on the sa, when it is followed by a ya, that anugraha turns to yai. So sanyamya. But if you're not following that rule, a lot of people, they don't follow that rule. They just have samyamya. That is also correct. There's no problem. So either way, it's okay. But chanting rule wise, sanyamya is better. So tani sarvani sanyamya yuktaha asita matparaha vashehi yasya indriyani tasya pragya pratisthita. And the Anvaya is tani sarvani sanyamya yuktaha matparaha asit. So sarvani you can add indriyani over there. So tani sarvani indriyani sanyamya yuktaha matparaha asit. Full stop. Yasya hi indriyani vashehe tasya prajna pratisthitaha. So yataha. So because tani sarvani indriyani, because of this, therefore all those senses, tani sarvani indriyani, all those sense organs, sanyamya, the one who has mastered, yuktaha, the one who is disciplined, and mat paraha asit, he should remain mat paraha, thinking of me as the highest objective in life. And if he does that, what will happen? Yasya hi, for that person, indriyani vashehe, whose sense organs are under control, tasya prajna pratisthita, for that person, the wisdom becomes firm. He assimilates the knowledge. So the person who has discrimination, who is the master of his sense organs, when he sits in contemplation of me as Brahman, of himself as Brahman, for him, because he has all the sense organs under control, the knowledge becomes well established. So tani sarvani sanyamya asit. Therefore, may you keep tani sarvani, all the sense organs, under your control. Do not be enslaved by them. So you are supposed to lead the sense organs. The sense organs are not supposed to lead you. You know, sometimes you see in the morning walks that a person is walking a dog, and the dog is supposed to be walked by the person, but sometimes the dog is powerful, and then what happens? It is the person who is following the dog. So this is what he's saying. Don't let the dog walk you. You walk the dog. Sense organs are supposed to lead us. That is what happens to Ajnani. But we should not allow that to happen. We should restrain them and make sure that they act in accordance with our instructions and not the other way around. We don't follow, prey to their, the powerful tendencies that the sense organs generate. So therefore, tani sarvani samyamya. Restrain these sense organs. This is not suppression. This is mastery, right? There is a difference between the samyamya, that mastery, and suppression. What is the difference? In suppression, the restraint is externally imposed upon me without really understanding. So imposed restraint is suppression. And when you understand and you transcend, it is mastery. And here he is saying this is not sensory suppression, this is sensory mastery, right? And why is it important? Because prajna pratisthita bhavati. The spiritual knowledge becomes assimilated. Vedanta becomes more meaningful. And in Dhamma, this prajna pratisthita bhavati, what is it called? So in Tattvabodha, it was called Indriya Nigraha. The sense organs become under your control. Indriya Nigraha, also known as Dhamma. So what is the result of Indriya Nigraha? What is the result of withdrawal of the sense organs? So we have to look back at our lives and realize that our sense organs we spend a lot of our time in our sense organs pursuing unnecessary pursuits, unnecessary objects, right? There are distractions, TV watching, gossiping, reading, seeing unnecessary TV news. So all this are the engagement of the sense organs with unnecessary pursuits. And when he's saying Indriya Nigraha, we have all these sense organs, they are now withdrawn from there. You do not have these distractions anymore. And there is a problem here, because when distractions are not there, there's plenty of time available to the mind, right? And we remember that an idle mind can become the devil's workshop. So a mind which does not have a focused, healthy pursuit can become dangerous. And therefore, this extra time which I get because I have withdrawn my sense organs from sense objects, and therefore I have extra time in my mind, that extra time has to be used to study Vedanta. And therefore Krishna says, Yukta matpara asitaha. He says, Yuktaha is joined to. Matta is Ishvara. So that inner Atma of all, that Ishvara which is none other than me, the inner self of all Jivas. Paraha means superior, important. So he says, Yukta matpara asitaha. Join with me, which me, consider me as the most important thing in your life. All other objects are secondary only. And here he is talking about matparaha, worship me. So here Krishna is saying that in addition to being Nirguna Ishvara, I am also Avatara, Saguna Ishvara. He is presenting this so that I can meditate upon Krishna, Rama, Shiva, any deity I can worship. And Krishna says, this is the very Atma of yourself. You have to understand that even though you are worshipping Saguna Ishvara, at the back of your mind, you should know, na anya aham tasmat. Your thought should not be different from the fact that I am Krishna. So you should know that I am not different from Krishna. There is a very profound meaning. When I know that aham tasmat anya na anya, I am not different from that Krishna. So the first understanding is I am not different from Krishna. The second understanding is, and therefore I am not asking any help from Krishna. I cannot ask any help from Krishna because I am not different from Krishna. And therefore there is no surrender. I am not surrendering to Krishna at all. What am I doing? I am claiming that I am Krishna. I am not different from Krishna is to say that I am claiming that I am Krishna. When I claim that I am Krishna, I am dropping Saguna Ishvara. So I am not asking help from Krishna. I am not surrendering to Krishna. And this is Nididhyasana. So here we should introduce two important subjects. One is what we call a triangular format. Triangular format means there are three things in our lives, three entities in our lives. So Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. So living with the concept of Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara is what we call triangular format. So I am the Jiva, the world, the Jagat is different from me, and Ishvara, the creator of the world, is different from me. When I have all this in my mind constantly, which is 99.9% of the people, then I am living in this triangular format. So Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. I am the Jiva, the helpless, miserable human being. I live in this world, Jagat, and which has been created by Ishvara. So three things are there. This is called triangular format. And then there is binary format. There are only two things are there, Ishvara and Jagat. What happened to Jiva in this particular configuration? What happened to Jiva? That Jiva has understood that he is not different from Ishvara. And therefore, in the binary format, there is only Ishvara and the Jagat. Right? In the triangular format, I am a helpless Jiva. Whenever a problem comes, I run to Ishvara. In the binary format, I am Ishvara. And I have a dependence. Yes, I have a dependence on the teaching alone. So depending on Ishvara, I am Karma Yogi. I am in triangular format. Depending on the teaching, I am a Jnana Yogi. I am in binary format. So all of us should make the movement from triangular format to binary format. As long as you depend upon Ishvara for everything, you are a Karma Yogi. Once your mind has been purified, you understand that I am Ishvara, I am myself, and therefore I should depend upon the teaching for my support. Here you are not become a Jnani, but you know that you are Ishvara. I am a Jnana Yogi. I am in the process of attaining Jnana. And what is this teaching there? This teaching here is that when I say depending on the teaching, what is the teaching? The teaching is that what Krishna gives, what all the Vedas give, what all the Upanishads give, that you require no help. You don't have to run to anybody for help. You require no help because nothing can disturb you. What do you want to be helped from? So here, Krishna is wanting to reveal himself as the very Atma of everybody, not as a person. So he says it is the Atma Dhyanam that Krishna is prescribing here, the meditation upon the Atma. So this is only a small taste. He will talk about this in detail later. So here Matpara means see me, the very Atma, as yourself. So Nirvana Shatakam is there, right? Mano Buddhya Ahankara Chittani Naham Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shehoham. This is what it means. See yourself as Chidananda Rupaha. See yourself as a very Atma. So Matparaha Atma Dhyanaha Para Asit. You must meditate upon me as the very Atma of yourself. And this Atma Dhyanam is not very easy because it requires a lot of discipline. And therefore Krishna says, Yuktaha. With discipline may you practice Atma Dhyana. What is discipline? Withdrawal of the sense organs. The extroverted mind has to be withdrawn and focused upon the Atma. So this is the second sadhana, which is Atma Dhyanam, also called Nidhi Dhyasana. And why should I? Rasavarjam api asya. The mental attraction still remains. Refer to the previous paragraph. Rasavarjam api asya. The mental attraction has not gone. All these rasas, all these mental attractions, all these tendencies to lean towards sense objects, they are all obstructions to the knowledge being completely assimilated. And therefore, in Nididhyasanam, you will meditate upon yourself as Purna Atma, Asanga Atma, Sakshi Atma, Akartra Atma, Abhokta Atma. The meditation is I am Purna Atma, I am Asanga Atma, I am Sakshi Atma, I am Akartra Atma. All this meditation that I am that Atma. Atma is not different from me. And when that meditation establishes me as in the confirmed, in the doubtless knowledge, doubtless conviction that I am Atma, then rasaha api nivartate. That leaning also goes away. That yearning also goes away. So there could be a question here. How can you say that in this context, why can you not say that Krishna is Saguna Ishvara? Why should you take as Atma? So if you look at that, what is the context? This is the beginning from the 55th verse. We are talking about what? Sthita Prajna. Right? Sthita Prajna is the Jnani. So in the context of Sthita Prajna, the Jnani, to take Krishna as Saguna Ishvara here is violating the context. And therefore you have to take it as Atma only. And therefore you will see that here, Krishna is presenting three disciplines in this verse. What is that? Dhamma, Indriya Nigraha. That is indicated by the words Tani Sarvani Sanyamya. Then Sama, Shama, Mano Nigraha is the second discipline. That is indicated by the word Yuktaha. Then Nidhi Dhyasanam, that is indicated by the word Matparaha. And then if you are committed to all these three, what three? Indriya Nigraha, Dhamma, Shama, Nidhi Dhyasanam. Indriya Nigraha, Mano Nigraha, and Nidhi Dhyasanam. So sense control, mind control, and Vedantic meditation. If you are committed to all these three, what happens? Tasya prajna pratishtita. That person's wisdom, it gets assimilated, gets stabilized. And in this stabilized condition, what are the benefits? He gives up ownership of the body and the mind. He gives up worries about himself and family. And thirdly, and very importantly, this person, whenever he prays, he no longer has any special prayers. Special prayers in the sense, give me health, make this for me, give my children something. So anything asking for a favor from Bhagavan or for a materialistic desire to be fulfilled is a special prayer. And this particular person who has given up ownership, given up worries about his family, he will no longer ask for any special prayers. And therefore, he is as good as any sannyasi. And therefore, he says, the third most important discipline is what? Is Nidhi Dhyasana. May you meditate on the teaching. Why is it necessary? That he will talk about. Why should it be necessary to meditate upon the teaching? What is the problem with different kinds of objects and thinking about them? That we will see in the next verse. So right now we will stop here and see if any questions are there. Okay, so we don't have too much time left. So I will just start off the next verse and we can complete the discussion in the next class. So let us just chant.
I had one question, sir.
Bolo.
Sir, you said, right, it's not to suppress your desires, but to grow out of it.
Yeah.
So can you just explain me with one example?
Did you have, I can't ask you for a Barbie doll, right? What was your favorite toy when you were young?
When I was young, I don't remember, yeah, but there was something.
Okay, did you have a cycle?
Yeah, I did.
Now you are attached to the cycle, right? For a long
Yes.
time. When did the attachment go?
I understood, sir. When it no longer gave me any pleasure.
When you got a motorcycle, the attachment went to cycle.
Yeah.
You replaced it with a new object.
Okay.
And when the motorcycle was replaced by a car, then you lost the fascination for the motorcycle.
Yeah.
So you are not suppressing, you are not throwing away the cycle, but the cycle
Yes.
has lost value for you. That is the growth.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, please.
We are talking about sense control. Just wanted to clarify one thing, like we are living in this world, we go and we meet lots of people, and sometimes we don't want to say something, but
Your voice is breaking. I'm afraid we can't hear you. Your voice is broken up completely. Okay, there's no question coming from there. Any other questions?
Om Acharya ji, I had one question.
Yes,
When
please.
we were speaking about suppression of desires, and we realized that not all desires, sometimes desires need to be fulfilled at times. So which are the desires specifically that we are talking about, which have to be controlled via tapas? And which are the ones in the initial portion of our study that can, we can take forward and grow out of them?
See, in the beginning stages, it's not very wise, because there are 3-4 stages of bhakti. In the initial stages, you have desires. Now, until those desires, you realize that fulfilling those desires again and again and again is not going to be a permanent solution. Until that realization comes, you need to keep fulfilling those desires.
But some certain desires, like if I say, desires within the purview of dharma, if it is said,
yeah, that's correct.
So like if I want to go out and keep on having maybe a masala dosa or an XYZ and fulfilling, so that's what you're saying, that they need to be fulfilled because they shouldn't be suppressed unless it's coming from a sense of peace, the suppression, or not
sense of peace.
fulfilling the desire.
By understanding that eating masala dosa, every day, not for the purpose of fulfilling your hunger, satisfying hunger, but as a taste measure.
Right.
That there's nothing much going to happen. It will still remain the same old masala dosa. It will give you pleasure for 10 minutes and it will go away. So nothing wrong in fulfilling the desires, as long as those desires are not binding on you. This we discussed earlier. The desire should not be binding. A binding desire is a desire which, if not fulfilled, upsets your mind. So what is being mentioned here is that it is okay to have desires, providing that you have the attitude that if the desire is fulfilled, great. If it is not fulfilled, it's okay. My mind doesn't get disturbed. That is the main issue here. Does your mind get disturbed or not?
Okay. Thank you.
Acharya ji, sorry, I got disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So my question is that we are trying to have the sense control, but sometimes situations like that we are not able to do that, and after a minute we realize that we were not supposed to do this thing, but somehow due to past experiences it happened, and then the feeling of guilt comes in. So there are two questions. So there, how to control the feeling of guilt, and how to make sure that I do not lose my control.
It's a good question. So the first one is that guilt about a past act of something which is over is a useless emotion. It can only weaken you, right? So Shastra never says feel guilty. So you should not use any event in the past which has already occurred to be guilty, but use it for learning purposes only. Strip it of its guilt, because what is over with. Okay, like if, for example, you should have not have said something to somebody you said. Fine. So that's over. Can you go back and change? You can't change that. So what is the use of feeling guilty? So what can you do? You can do two things. One is, if you have done something or said something which you should not have, you can go and apologize. Okay. And even if the other person insults you while apologizing, it is okay, because it is your sadhana. So you apologized. And secondly is to learn from that. What is the learning? That I should think before I act. That is all that is required. And you do it sufficient number of times. 100 times you will find that you have reacted. But after every one of these reactions you are contemplating, sooner or later your thinking pattern will modify to the extent that you will be able to stop yourself from reacting. That is what is required.
Okay, sir.
So it's not that it will happen one time or 10 times. You have to continuously examine it every time it happens. Make a, you know, recompense. If you have had damaged somebody, hurt somebody, you apologize. But feeling guilty is no solution at all. So for number one is to, if you can correct the wrong that you have done, do it. And number two is that if you cannot correct the wrong, at least apologize. And number three is do not feel guilty. Learn from that. Apply that learning to future actions.
Okay, sir. Just to make it more precise, I wanted to say, like, let's just give you an example. Let's say I want to control my eating senses. I don't want to eat sweet, but I go in a marriage and I see lots of sweet, and I end up eating lots of sweet. And after some time, I feel though I was not supposed to eat so much. So how to control this
What is
feeling
the
that,
point? What is the point of saying after some time? You have already eaten, right?
yeah, after eating, I realized that I did
So it's
make a
okay.
mistake.
You've eaten already. So next, tell yourself that next time I will not eat 10 sweets.
But
Or
it
you can,
repeats every time.
no, you can do it. That is a matter for your own willpower, right? If you've eaten 10 pieces of laddu today, tomorrow you say I eat 9. So don't say I won't eat at all. That's how to work. So shanai, slowly only you have to do. So if you like at one shot you've eaten 10 laddus, the next time you go to a marriage, eat 9 of them. After that, eat 8. After that, eat 7. So you'll have a lot of marriages to go to, but you know, you can slowly reduce it.
Okay, thank you, Acharya.
So Acharya ji, it means we do active titiksha.
You have to be alert all the time. That's the thing. Your mind has to be alert. That's why it says pramathini prasabhavam. The indriyas are powerful enough to carry you away. Therefore, be alert all the time. So alertness has many components. One is waiting for that particular desire to appear, then making a distance between this desire and you and saying, okay, fine, I'm not going to do this. It might not happen the first time, might not happen the second time. It might not happen 100 times. But the 101st time, you will be able to do it. That's important. Slowly only this can be managed. Nobody can turn his strongest desires into a non-desire in one shot. And therefore, do not ever feel guilty. Don't listen to people who tell you you're useless. You are not. Just make sure you're continuously working upon yourself. That is all that is required. Yes, Lata ji, boliye.
Hello, Raviji.
Haan ji.
So I just wanted to check. It's really important for us to control our senses. So things like our eyes and ears are like the biggest ones, and which hurt us as well and give us pleasure as well. So can you just share me some tips wherein which we can actually control negativity of eyes and ears in and around our place, because or is it just up to willpower?
It's
Or
not just up to
meditation?
willpower. It's also up to, when you say something is negative, actually it's negative because you think it is negative, right? The idea is to finally understand that everything is okay. All that is required is that it should not disturb my mind.
Okay.
So finally you can come, see, how many people will you walk away from? You might have 100 friends. All of them will have something negative to say about something.
Yeah.
One way is to become a sannyasi and go to the forest and not see anybody. Right? But if that's not possible, and that's really running away. You're running away, the problem is the negativity is affecting the mind, right? And you are taking that same mind wherever you go.
Correct.
So the ultimate solution is to strengthen the mind, and therefore the thing is to immunize the mind against all this. If they say something, you can rationalize by saying, okay, this is their behavior, this is the way they are, they are built, and they really don't mean it, but they can't help it. So I often use the example of the barking dog. So when the dog barks at you, what do? You don't get angry with the dog. You don't get negative vibes from the dog, right? You are just careful about making sure that the dog won't hurt you. You take those precautions. Same thing. Negative people, you take precautions to ensure that they can't hurt you, but you understand that they are built in the way they are built, and that cannot be changed. So don't try
Yeah.
to get resentment. Why is he saying this? That is what creates the negativity.
Got it.
It's all easier said than done, but it takes years of assimilation of this teaching. So that is the reason why the teaching is so important for a consistent period of time, because over a period of time, it will seep into your body, into your mind, and then you will be much stronger.
Thank you.
Raviji, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so continuing with what was just said about this, that when there is something hurting us, somebody hurting us in the sense that it is disturbing us, and we think of, okay, this might be the way they are. So are we again not creeping in the duality factor, that they are different from me? I might be Brahman, but they are not.
See, the point is that if you are really established in non-duality, then nothing will hurt you. You cannot say I am hurting, somebody hurting me, and at the same time say that duality is not there.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment I say somebody else, I am in duality.
There is duality. Therefore, there is no question. Admit to yourself that you are in duality, and therefore you deal with it differently. As a jnani, it doesn't matter to you in any case. Your mind is strong enough to be not touched by anything. And anything, everybody else is you. So who are you? Who hurts you? Nobody hurts you. That's a difference. We are talking about practicality. The practical ways to handle yourself, which is in duality only. It's in Vyavaharika. There is duality all around. Remember, you cannot escape duality perceptually. Perceptually, duality will always be there. It is only intellectually that you have to withdraw into non-duality.
Okay. Will we be dealing with this in detail later? Because
Lots
this
of
is
time.
something
They'll keep
very
on coming up,
difficult.
and almost every chapter will keep on coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with this we'll stop. Thank you for your patience. Om Purnamadam Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you for your patience. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, Acharya.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Acharya.